which rather tastefully match my dress, I think. Complete accident. Now, what does yellow mean in the world of business book publishing? It's a very optimistic choice.
This is a weird trend, and possibly not the most significant trend in business literature, but I've started to notice this year and the end of last year that people are doing these lurid yellow covers. I think it's partly to stand out from the crowd, although frankly you could say if I've got three just on my list of 8 business books this year, that's probably not standing out so much. It's notably more lurid than the covers of the science books that Clive's got, and I think it's just one of those. If you're going to stand out from the 10,000, particularly at something like the airport bookstore, which is where a lot of business books are apparently bought, you've got to be doing something. So they've made a big deal out of going for yellow, and I've been trying to track it on Twitter in the way that one does, looking at this highly insignificant trend of yellow colours.
But even the typography is rather similar. The Age of Agile, the New Power, Meltdown, they have rather similar typefaces.
Sans serif.
So they're even imitating each other.
Yes, that's true. I guess most publishers can't tell until they get to the marketplace exactly what their rivals are going to look like. So they may be regretting the fact that they all went with bright yellow.
And I just wondered, because in fiction, traditionally, the first half of the year, the second half of the year is when many of the big novels come out. The first half of the year, not so much. But that's completely kind of disappeared now, and novels are published throughout the year, even in August, traditionally a sort of dead month for publishing. And would you say that's the same in your fields? Do you think there's a difference between the books published January to July or July to December, more heavyweight in either side of the year?
It's a bit difficult to tell. I mean, I'm also helping to filter, as always, the Book Award, and that has a closing date of June the 30th, but an eligibility date up until mid-November. And the mid-November choice made early when we started the Book Award was partly to allow that very rich crop of business books published between September and mid-November to be included in that year's crop. So I imagine that publishers are still aiming into those fields. I don't think it means that the ones published earlier in the year are any worse. There's quite a crop this year of books that came out, I noticed, in January, looking at how we work and offering prescriptions for the year ahead, if you like, which I thought was an interesting mini trend.
How about you, Clive?
I think in science we do have slightly more heavyweight representation later in the year. I was just thinking back to the books I recommended last Christmas of the 2017 crop, and more than half were in the second half of the year, and that's not just because I wanted to avoid repeating. At a guess, I would say a couple of these might make it to the best of the year. I've mentioned one of them already, When Darwin Comes to Town. The other one was so good I lent it to a friend and haven't managed to extract it.
Oh, what was that?
So I can't hold it up for you. That's by David Reich, and it's called Who We Are and Where We Came From. David Reich is a genetics professor at Harvard, and he's a leader in this fast-growing new field of ancient DNA, extracting genes from old human bones and remains, which is now possible, amazingly, going back tens, even hundreds of thousands of years. And he has shown what you can tell that traditional archaeology couldn't about human population movements brilliantly. So I think probably those will emerge at Christmas when we do our big bumper FT Christmas book recommendations.
Oh, yes.
And there'll be 4 unknowns to emerge.
Yeah, stay tuned for that. We'll be back in December. But before we go, we've got a question that's come in from Paolo Leasing. How does one begin the habit of reading books if you're perhaps not used to reading in your field or your field?
Well, I mean, I guess I would inevitably say, if you're looking for business books to start with, particularly recent business books, you could do worse than look at some of the ones that have got through to win our Business Book of the Year award, which you can find easily online, a long list of the winners, and pick by genre there, which is also another helpful way of doing it. I mean, I think there are, these days, I must say, in business writing, starting with some of the long articles that lay behind some of these books. Oliver Shah, author of Damaged Goods, is a Sunday Times journalist who wrote a lot about Philip Green. John Carreyrou writes for the Wall Street Journal and followed the Theranos affair. So getting into business writing through reading long-form business journalism is not a bad way of warming up to some of the books. And I would start with the ones that we've mentioned, that maybe the more like the beach reads,
right,
rather than going straight into the ones that are heavyweight, more academic business books.
What about you, Clive?
Well, apart from reading reviews in the FT, if you're interested in science books, I mean, echoing slightly what Andrew said, if you read Scientific American or New Scientist, read some of the sort of long articles there, they will often have recommendations, and both those have book reviews. I think that's quite a good starting place.
That's the gateway drug to
yes.
serious tomes.
Isn't there also the Wellcome Prize? Is that for science books?
Yes, there is.
Which might, I guess, give a guide.
Well, there are two. There's the Wellcome Prize is more for sort of medical and health. Right. The Royal Society has the main Science Books Prize, and that, I can't remember when that is. I was once a judge, but
quick questions come in from Christian Otoy. Has anyone read this book, The 10 Great Inventions of Evolution by Nick Lane?
I know Nick Lane. He's a great evolutionary biochemist at UCL. He's very intelligent, and I haven't read that book, but I've read one or two of his other books. I'm sure that knowing Nick Lane, it would be great, but I haven't actually read it.
One last question, something that intrigues me. Subtitles. When we're putting together our summer books and Christmas books, there's usually a pithy 1 or 2 word title, and then a very lengthy subtitle, which can also be different in the US from the UK. And is this just purely a business book trend, or is it also in science too?
It's definitely happened in business books, and as you can see from some of these, Steve Denning's book, The Age of Agile, which is about, well, as the book subtitle says, how smart companies are transforming the way work gets done. There's a big how and why trend
right.
in business books, and I think it's because unless it's a book specifically about a business person, Steve Jobs, the biography, didn't, I think, have a subtitle other than the biography. Then it's a bit hard to tell what a book called New Power is about.
You need to know what you're coming away with once you read it.
Yeah, and I think it's an additional tag, but they have got a bit bloated, I think. I think we could go for a little bit of trimming on the subtitle front if publishers are watching.
Another thing I noticed is how to something other, comma, or how to do something else. And so it's sort of...
Yes, interestingly, 2 of my science books I see are subtitled How. The one, The Secret Life of Science, how it really works and why it matters. And Darwin Comes to Town, how the urban jungle drives evolution. But this one by Carlo Rovelli, which is probably going to be the bestseller out of this lot, because Carlo Rovelli is a brilliant cosmologist and writing and has already got a huge reputation. He simply calls his little purple volume The Order of Time. I think that says it. Why do you need a subtitle?
Quite right.
The Order of Time.
There's an interesting addition to that, which is that 2 of the books that I chose, Meltdown by Chris Clearfield and Andrus Tilschik, and Saadia Zahidi's 50 Million Rising, they were both books that grew out of book proposals that won our Bracken Bauer Prize for young writers who just have to put in a proposal. The young writers who enter, even the winners, are very bad at titles, and both those are titles quite different from the ones that they put on their book proposals. Thank goodness.
The publishers got involved there at some point.
So.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been great chatting to you. And
Pleasure.
thank you.